Deterrence is not a law of physics. It doesn't exist in the way gravity exists, or the way a wall exists. It exists only as long as enough people believe it does. For 70 years, the architecture of American global power rested on one core premise, that the cost of directly attacking the United States, or its installations, or its forces, was so certain, so overwhelming, so unambiguous, that no rational actor would choose to pay it. That premise did not prevent every conflict. It prevented the specific kind of conflict where a regional power decides that American military presence is a constraint it can remove by force. Until the night a missile crossed into Kuwait, Camp Arifjan is not a base in the way most people picture a base. It is the central nervous system of American military logistics across the entire Middle East theater. Army Preposition Stock 5, a forward cache capable of outfitting a full combat brigade in 72 hours, without a single ship crossing an ocean, 55 kilometers south of Kuwait City. Close enough to matter, far enough to feel safe, or at least, it did. But here is what the missile actually hit. Because it wasn't the base was the distraction. Camp Arifjan was not sitting undefended. Patriot PAC-3 batteries, close-in weapon systems, early warning radar integrated directly into Central Command's regional grid. On paper, nearly untouchable. Iran did not attack the base. Iran attacked the math. What the IRGC executed is called a saturation strike, a doctrine refined over 15 years of watching American forces intercept isolated missile threats with relative ease. The logic is brutally simple. Patriot systems are exceptional at tracking and killing individual threats. But the intercept equation collapses when you fire 12, 15, 20 projectiles simultaneously from multiple vectors in a compressed time window. Add ballistic decoys, inert shapes designed to look real on radar, exhaust interceptor inventories before the actual warheads arrive, and the math shifts. Iran's ballistic missiles are accurate to within 30 meters at a range of 10 kilometers. These are not the crude scuds of the Gulf War era. These are precision instruments built for one specific purpose, to find the ceiling of Western air defense, and exceed it by exactly one. One gets through. That is all it takes. But while every radar dish in the Gulf was pointed at the sky that morning, something else was already in motion. Something no Patriot battery in the world can intercept. Because beneath the military strike, Iran had already mapped 3 other vulnerabilities, and the base was only the most visible one. The Strait of Hormuz is 39 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Through that gap every single day, 17 million barrels of oil move, roughly 17% of global petroleum consumption, flowing through a channel you could drive across in 35 minutes. Iran has spent 3 decades preparing to close that channel. Fast attack boat swarms, coastal missile batteries, naval mines deployable from unmarked fishing vessels in under 4 minutes. The tools are already positioned. They have been for years. But beneath the surface, literally something more fragile. Running along the Gulf seafloor are 5 major undersea fiber optic cable systems. Together, they carry an estimated 40% of data traffic between Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. They are not armored, they are not hardened, and they run through waters Iran can access. A simultaneous strike on a major American installation combined with the severing of even 2 of those cables would create what military planners call a multi-domain blackout. Not darkness in one system, but cascading partial blindness across military coordination, financial clearing, and communications networks simultaneously. The base was not just the target, the base was the distraction. Short silences if Iran was precise enough to execute the military strike. What does that tell you about how precisely they calculated everything that would follow? And here is where the story stops being about Kuwait, because 4 capitals are watching Washington right now, each running a different calculation. And not one of them is asking the same question. Moscow is watching closely. Russian military planners have spent years modeling American deterrence. If the response to a direct strike on American forces is measured, proportionate, and carefully telegraphed, the lesson Russia absorbs is a specific one. The ceiling for direct confrontation with American assets just moved. That recalibration does not produce immediate wars. It produces slow-building confidence in adversarial actors that moves once considered off the table are now quietly available. Slow down. Beijing is running a different calculation. China imports roughly 50% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. A prolonged Gulf conflict that locks down American military and political attention in the Middle East, at the precise moment Taiwan Strait tensions remain elevated, serves a very different set of strategic interests. Beijing does not need to fire a single shot to benefit from what is happening right now. Riyadh is asking whether the American response will be enough. Not whether it will come, but whether, if the answer is insufficient, the regional security environment Saudi Arabia woke up inside yesterday still exists tomorrow. And Tel Aviv has already answered that question internally. Every Israeli strategic planner understands that a major Iranian strike against American forces is not a standalone event. It is a signal to every Iranian-aligned proxy across the region that the threshold for escalation has shifted. When that threshold moves, the entire architecture of regional deterrence has to be rebuilt from scratch. But here is the layer of this war that no one is saying out loud, the capability question. Because one incident in Kuwait would be concerning. Two simultaneous capability demonstrations point to something structural. While Camp Arifjan was burning, a separate analytical crisis was unfolding in defense ministries, from Ottawa to Tokyo. Reports from multiple outlets, including Bloomberg, alongside Iranian state media claims, describe the tracking, targeting, and striking of what is described as an F-35, the most expensive weapons program in human history, $400 billion in development. Designed around a single core promise: invisibility, a radar cross-section roughly the size of a golf ball on conventional systems. For 2 decades, the doctrine was simple: if you fly an F-35, you are unreachable. That doctrine is now under serious challenge. American officials described an emergency landing. Iran described a destroyed aircraft. The gap between those two narratives is enormous. But the debate itself is the signal. In every previous conflict where American stealth aircraft operated, there was no debate. The aircraft flew, the missions completed, the adversary had no answer. We are now, for the first time in a serious military confrontation, having a public argument about whether an F-35 was successfully engaged. There are 2 technical pathways to defeating stealth: low-frequency radar, long-wave systems that detect presence without precise targeting, and passive detection, listening for the electronic emissions that any sophisticated aircraft inevitably produces. Russia invested heavily in the first. China invested more heavily in both. And 4 days before this incident, Russia reportedly indicated that Iranian air defenses were about to demonstrate new capabilities. Whether that represents direct technology transfer or parallel development, the outcome is identical. Iran in 2025 appears to possess a detection and engagement capability that was not believed to exist in 2020. A 5-year acceleration that the Western defense establishment did not fully account for. Which brings us to the only honest question left. The one every general knows the answer to, but no politician will say in public. Here is what the historical record says about air campaigns. Not what doctrine says, not what press briefings say, what the record says. The United States firebombed Tokyo on the night of March 10, 1945. In that single night, more Japanese were killed than at Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Japan did not surrender. Then came Hiroshima, then Nagasaki. Japan still debated. What finally broke the strategic calculus was the Soviet invasion of Manchuria on August 8 between the 2 bombs, which eliminated Japan's last possible exit from the war. The lesson is not about nuclear weapons. The lesson is this: no air campaign in recorded modern history has forced a government with a functional population, intact ideology, and a survivable military to surrender through bombing alone. Not Korea, not Vietnam, not Iraq, not once. And yet, the strategy in Iran is bomb from the air, create pressure, force regime change, without sending a single soldier across the border. The escalation ladder extends upward toward civilian areas, petroleum infrastructure, desalination plants. And Iran climbs that ladder alongside whoever ascends it. Strike their desalination plants. They strike Saudi Arabia's. They strike Israel's 4 or 5 critical water facilities. There is no point on that ladder from which one side looks down, and the other does not. And as time goes by, the defender's ability to intercept incoming fire does not flatline. It decreases. The war that was called a little excursion is on day 21, with a $200 billion Pentagon funding request, 7, 0 targets struck, and no mechanism visible for stopping. As I said, deterrence is not a law of physics, it is a belief. So what happens to everything built on top of that belief when the belief gets tested? And the test does not produce a clean answer. 3 things happened in this war that cannot be unhappened. A missile got through Patriot. The AA radar system may have engaged an F-35 that wasn't supposed to reach it. And the historical record from Tokyo to Tehran makes unambiguously clear that air power alone has never produced regime change in a state that chooses to absorb the punishment. These are not 3 separate crises. There are 3 data points in the same argument. Iran's answer to the question of American deterrence is not, "We cannot challenge you." Iran's answer is, "We have already changed the calculation."